Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling something I think we all struggle with sometimes. Forgiveness.
Not just like saying it's okay, but like really letting go.
Exactly. So to help us out, we're looking at this Christian podcast episode, How to Truly Forgive. What are the 7 biblical steps to freedom?
I like that you said steps because right away this podcast is very like action oriented.
It is.
Yeah.
So step 1 is deciding to forgive, and it's called a spiritual act. I got to admit, at first I was like, how do you do that?
It's almost like when you decide to like start working out.
Okay.
You're not instantly fit, but you've made the choice, right?
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And the podcast even uses this verse, Colossians 3:13. Bear with one another and forgive each other if anyone has a reproach to make to another. The Lord has forgiven you. Act as he has.
It's saying like we're supposed to forgive, like because we've been forgiven.
So it's not about the other person so much, more like our own selves.
Right. They even say sometimes we think we don't have to forgive because we still feel sad or angry, but that decision is like separate from actually healing.
Man, that's where it gets stuck. Like, my brain gets it, but my feelings, not so much.
Think of it like if you had a physical injury, right? You might decide to do physical therapy, but it still takes time.
Okay, I see that. So how does that spiritual act part fit into step 2, which is all about self-reflection?
Well, it's like before we can really forgive someone else, we gotta, see our own part.
Honestly, that feels backwards. Like, if someone hurts me, I don't want to think about my flaws. I want to be like, dude, you messed up.
Sure, that's natural. But we're all human, right? We all make mistakes. Sometimes we even contribute to stuff without meaning to.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like they even quote Psalm 19.3 tune, everyone makes mistakes without knowing it. Forgive me the faults of which I am not aware.
Wow, okay, that verse is like putting things in perspective a bit.
Right. And it can help us actually forgive others more when we're a little more honest about ourselves, too.
So it's not about saying what they did was okay. It's more about creating space for things to get better.
Exactly, for both people. But now, what if someone really did do something awful? Does forgiving them mean I'm saying it was fine?
That's what I struggle with.
Good question, and the podcast addresses that head on. They're very clear. Forgiving does not mean it was good or didn't hurt.
Too. Okay, but then what is forgiveness? If it's not saying it was fine, what are we actually doing?
It's more about letting go of how their actions are, like, affecting us. Not excusing them, but reclaiming our own, peace.
So, like, breaking free of the hurt instead of it, like, having power over us.
Exactly. And that's where that spiritual part ties in, aligning ourselves with God's will, which is, all about love.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But step 3 brings in prayer, which honestly I find a little intimidating. What if I don't even know what to pray?
This podcast actually encourages us to pray for the person who hurt us. Like they quote Luke 6.28, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you.
Whoa. I mean, that's a lot when you're still hurting.
It is, but they argue it can be really powerful. It might even like open their heart to change.
So it's less about me controlling them, more about like surrendering the bad feelings to something bigger.
Yeah, like planting a seed of transformation for both of you.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, step 4 is letting go of revenge, which honestly sometimes feels really tempting.
It's human nature. But the podcast says holding on to anger only traps us in the past. They use Romans 12.19, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath.
So like we don't have to be the words to punish them. There's a higher justice at work.
Exactly. They even say, try repeating, like, I trust God to be my avenger, to let go of that payback feeling.
Going from I'll get you back to God's got this. That's a big shift, but I see how each step builds on the last one.
It's a process, takes time, but freedom from those bad feelings is possible.
All right, ready for step 5? What's next on this forgiveness journey?
This one might sound simple, but it's tough. Stop talking about what happened. They even quote Isaiah 43.12, forget the former things, do not dwell on the past.
Wait, so like bottle it up, pretend it never happened. That doesn't seem healthy.
It's not about suppressing, it's about breaking the cycle of dwelling. They say, what we feed is what will live.
Oh, so if we keep feeding the hurt, it stays strong. Got to nurse the healing instead.
Exactly. And speaking of words, step 6 goes even further. Don't speak badly about the person either.
Oof, that's hard. I mean, venting to friends feels good. And doesn't it help you process?
It can, but this podcast says there's a difference between processing and dwelling. Constantly rehashing just keeps the wound open.
So not ignoring it, but choosing words carefully. not feeding the negativity.
Right. And speaking badly of them only keeps us angry. It might feel good, but keeps us stuck.
Like that saying, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It's about our well-being.
Exactly. Which leads to the final and maybe hardest point. Forgiveness isn't one time, it's ongoing.
Wait, I thought once I decided, I was good.
They say those feelings might come back up, and that's okay. It's a process. We got to keep choosing forgiveness.
So like a muscle we gotta work.
Perfect way to put it. Takes time and practice. We'll stumble, but as long as we keep trying, we're on the right path.
This is, wow, more complex than I thought.
It is, but that's why having these steps is so helpful. We don't have to figure it all out alone.
All right, so we've covered a lot. Forgiveness as a spiritual act, self-reflection, choosing our words. But how do we actually do it? Go from theory to, like, real life.
Great question. And that's what we'll keep exploring. How to apply these steps and those little practical tips the podcast gives.
I'm ready for more. This is eye-opening, but I can already tell forgiveness is a journey that takes, like, courage and patience.
Absolutely, but the reward, that peace and freedom, makes it worth it.
So what's next on our forgiveness deep dive?
We'll get into those real-life applications and those nuggets of wisdom the podcast had to make real progress.
Sounds good. I'm ready to keep digging in.
You know, all this talk about how tough forgiveness is, it reminded me of this woman I know went through a really bad divorce.
Oh.
Yeah, husband cheated on her. She was like totally heartbroken. But what was amazing was how she approached forgiving him.
I mean,
It wasn't like quick or easy, but she saw it as a way to, take her own life back. Not saying what he did was okay, but to stop being so bitter,
wow, that's powerful. It really shows how forgiveness is about us, not them.
Totally. Her story proves that it's possible, even when you've been really hurt.
So going back to those practical tips, I'm curious about the prayer journal thing. Have you ever tried that?
Yeah, actually I have. It really helps.
How so?
Well, you can track your progress, see how your feelings change over time. You even start to notice those little breakthroughs.
I like that. Makes it less, abstract, something you can actually see.
And speaking of seeing progress, the podcast says it's okay to still feel pain. Forgiveness is a process.
That's important because sometimes we think we're supposed to just wake up one day and be totally over it.
Right. It doesn't work like that. It's a journey, ups and downs. Sometimes you got to take a step back before moving forward again.
Yeah. Which brings us to that idea of shifting perspectives. That feels really tough.
Oh, for sure. They say to try and see it from, God's point of view.
Well, hold on. How do you even do that?
Well, they suggest that when you do, understanding comes more easily. They even say, maybe God's using this to teach you something.
That's a huge shift, going from why me to what can I learn?
Exactly. Gets you out of that victim mindset, helps you see the bigger picture. They even use Romans 8.28 here. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him.
Okay, that is comforting. Even when it's awful, there's still, a plan.
Right. Not pretending it didn't hurt, but acknowledging that even in the bad, there can be good growth.
So it's about choosing to focus on that potential, even when it's hard to see.
Exactly. Trusting that there's a bigger picture, even if we don't get it right now, and we can be part of that.
Now, we talked about letting go of revenge, but the podcast also mentioned those affirmations to help with that. Do you use those?
I do. They can be really powerful. When you say, I trust God to be my avenger, it's actively surrendering that need to get even.
It's like saying, I'm letting go, someone else is handling this.
Yeah. Stepping out of the anger and into peace, surrender, which is what forgiveness is all about, right? Freedom.
Freedom from the pain, the bitterness, yeah.
Now, these next two tips might seem a little weird at first. The podcast says forgiveness isn't just what you say, but what you don't say. First, they say, stop talking about what happened. Stop rehashing it.
I think this is where I'd struggle. Venting feels good, and doesn't it help you, process things?
To a point, yeah. But they say there's a difference between processing and dwelling. If you keep rehashing, you're giving it more power, keeping the wound open.
So not ignoring it, but being careful what you feed, so to speak.
Right. And then they say, don't speak badly about the person either.
Oh, man, that's tough. I mean, gossiping, it can feel good in the moment.
Sure, but it keeps you stuck. And they quote Proverbs 16.28 here. A perverse person stirs up conflict, and a gossip separates close friends. Not very helpful, right?
So take it to God instead of gossiping.
Exactly. Use your words to heal, not divide. Break free of the negativity
This is reminding me of that saying, holding on to anger is like drinking poison.
and expecting the other person to die.
Right.
It's about us.
Which leads to their final point, and maybe the most important one. Forgiveness isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing choice.
You got it. They know those bad feelings might come back. It's normal. We just got to keep choosing to forgive.
Like a muscle we keep working out, even when it's tired.
Perfect analogy. It takes time, effort. We'll mess up, but if we keep trying, we're good.
This is all, wow, really insightful. Forgiveness is so much deeper than I realized.
It is. But they also paint this beautiful picture of what it can look like. Waking up one day with no bad feelings towards that person, just peace and gratitude for what you learned.
That's a beautiful image to hold on to. Even when it's tough, there's hope. Waking up with just peace and gratitude, that's amazing. Really shows how powerful forgiveness can be.
Yeah, going from all that pain and anger to actually healing and growing.
Like breaking out of some self-made prison of resentment, choosing to open that door.
And the key's been there all along. It's that choice to forgive over and over, even when it's hard.
So as we wrap up, I keep coming back to that idea. Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. There'll be good days, bad days.
It's like any big journey, right? You set off with your map, but then there's detours, you get lost.
And that can be so frustrating, especially when you're already hurting.
Exactly. That's why it's key to remember you don't have to do it alone. The podcast was big on prayer and faith, but even if that's not you, the message is get support. Friends, family, a therapist.
Yeah, asking for help is strong, not weak. No shame in that.
And sometimes just being around others who get it, who've been there, that helps a lot.
So to end our deep dive, I want to leave you with this question from the podcast. It really stuck with me. What part of forgiveness spoke to you the most? And what's one tiny step you can take today to start letting go of whatever you're holding on to?
Maybe it's just admitting you're ready to try. Or taking some time to reflect, look at your own part in things. Or just be extra kind to yourself today,
Or reach out to someone you trust, talk about it. You don't have to have it all figured out.
Just start somewhere. Any step towards forgiving is a win.
And as you keep exploring this, remember, there's tons of resources out there. Old wisdom, new research, whatever works for you. Keep learning, keep growing, keep finding ways to forgive. It can change everything for you and even for the world around you.